So the title of my presentation is Establishing an EMS in a Resource-Constrained Country. And in this regard, we'll be talking about the Ghana Ambulance Service. The last time I was online, I tried explaining in a resource-constrained country like Ghana, if you want to start an EMS, what are the challenges and what are the success stories to share with other people in other jurisdictions. And so today we are here again to discuss the same topic. Those of you who know Ghana is located in West Africa, and it has a population of 25 million people. And there are so many languages, or for that matter dialects, spoken in Ghana. Now, for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to really discuss the factors that influence the establishment of an EMS in a resource-constrained country. And I did mention that normally we have 5 major factors that one has to take into consideration when you're trying to establish an EMS. Number 1, there must be a trigger, because you need to know that in Africa, because EMS is not well developed, if you want to establish one, there must be some convincing reasons for the policymakers to buy into. And that is a trigger we'll be talking about. There must be political commitment, because you need the resources from the politicians. You must also have technical expertise. As you are aware, EMS is a specialty on its own, and we don't have people with the competence and technical expertise. They will not know the direction to move. And once you have that, you also need financial support to be able to sustain the system. And once the system is established, you need political awareness, the public awareness, and that will serve as a pressure source to motivate the politicians to continue to support the system in the form of advocacy. So having mentioned these general factors, we're going to take them one after the other. In the case of Ghana, for example, our trigger was a stadium disaster which occurred in 2001, 9th May precisely. And what happened was that 2 rival teams, football teams, were playing football, and at that time the stadium was very small, and after the football supporters and fans had entered the stadium, the security locked the gates to the stadium, and so when there was stampede, the supporters could not escape, and so over 120 sports enthusiasts died. There was definitely a public uproar against the deaths, and therefore the president at the time set up a committee to investigate the cause of the deaths. There was a recommendation that requested that with immediate effect the country should have an EMS or an ambulance system, because the absence of that system was what led to the high mortality or casualty rate suffered as a result of the stampede. As a result of that, the government had to show some commitment. So the president tasked the Ministry of Health and the relevant stakeholders to establish an EMS in Ghana. The Ministry of Health therefore took measures to establish the Ghana Ambulance Service. And they started by recruiting and training young men and women who were trained as emergency medical technicians. And therefore, since 2004 up till now, the Ghana Ambulance Service has been in existence and trying hard to establish an effective emergency medical service system for Ghana. Now, the next factor we need to discuss here is the technical expertise. So the ministry carefully selected a competent team to oversee the establishment and operations of the Ghana Ambulance Service. And this team normally has a tripartite team namely the national team where the head office of the ambulance services, and this comprises the director plus other operational managers. We also have the regional teams comprising the regional medical directors and their team, and we have the district teams normally led by the officers in charge of the ambulance stations in those communities. When we move from the technical expertise, the next thing you always have to look at is financial support. You must have dedicated source of funding through government budget allocation, and if you should run an insurance system, your insurance system should be such that you have reimbursement through the health insurance, and that is something we are trying to pursue over here in Ghana. But currently we get our budget allocation through the Ministry of Health. You must also think of other forms of funding through any form of funds, and you must also identify other sources of funding, and you could also fall on fees for service, which will let you generate internal generated funds. Now the other one, which is basically the public awareness and pressure, means that there must be advocacy to create public awareness, interest groups to mount pressure on government to support the service, because over here in Africa, one of the ways a government shows commitment is when there's advocacy and the public tends to put pressure, mount pressure on the government for the relevance or importance of a particular service. Otherwise, normally the service dies a natural death. So once we've given these broad factors, we're now going specifically to the Ghana Ambulance Service. And as I did mention in my introduction, it started in 2004, and it has been charged since then with the task of providing pre-hospital care to the sick and wounded and conveying them to health facilities. And it's normally with a view of supporting the policy of improving accessibility to medical care. Our vision is that we strive to provide the most comprehensive pre-hospital care in the most efficient manner possible to all people living in Ghana. And as a mission, the Ghana Ambulance Service, what we call here the National Ambulance Service, ensures to provide high standards of pre-hospital emergency care and treatment. It also ensures to provide high standards of ambulance transport for our emergency and non-emergency patients. And we try to provide coordinated and seamless care to patients with other agencies or institutions within the healthcare community. So basically, these are some of the components of our mission. And in terms of our functions, we provide pre-hospital emergency care to victims, be it road traffic, domestic, industrial, or medical patients. And we also transport casualties from scenes of incidents to appropriate health facilities. We provide standby emergency cover at mass public gatherings, and we provide care in collaboration with other emergency services in time of disaster or mass casualty incidents. And we assist in formulation and implementation of programs for first responders in our communities. Now, as a country, before 2004, virtually there was no EMS or ambulance station in the country. But since 2004 up to now, we can now boast of 121 stations countrywide. Now, if you look at this map, ideally you realize that I'm just trying to show the map to mention that before 2004 there was virtually nothing. From 2004 to 2008 we just had only 24 stations, but from 2008 to 2012 virtually the whole country is being covered with the services of the National Ambulance Service. And if you look at when we started in 2004, we saw just only 205 patients or casualties. The following year, the number increased to 1,490, and the third year we really had quadrupled the number to 4,442. And in the 4th year of our operations, the number doubled to 8,416. Now, the next thing you need to see is that because the emergency vehicles have a lifespan, after you have run for about 5 years, the number of cases you attend to tend to decline because the vehicles will have been spending more time in the workshops, and therefore the availability for emergencies tend to go down. And that is why in this graph you realize that from 2004 to virtually 2008 the number increased and peaked in 2008, and then it started declining. The good news is that because we've now gotten 161 new vehicles to augment the fleet and also open more stations, definitely the number of cases we've seen or we do see yearly is going to go up tremendously. So basically, what are the type of cases we attend to? We attend to inter-hospital transfers, we attend to road traffic accidents, we attend to domestic emergencies, and virtually any other form of emergency that comes our way. And we just don't treat only Ghanaians. We also treat tourists who visit the country and they get involved in accidents or get a heart problem or the other. We also tend to attend to communities, and virtually our services are general for everybody. Now, in any human endeavor, you may have challenges if you want to establish a well-functional system. And one of the major problems you will encounter, as we do here, is inadequate funding for emergency medical services in general, inadequate number of ambulances and ambulance stations. And you also, in many third world countries, come across the situation of lack of street names, making location and access to victims very difficult. And you also have the challenge of disrespect of sirens by motorists and the general public because of their abuse, actually. And then you will also come across situations where other vehicles use sirens, and therefore the public does no longer respect the sirens. And so sometimes when the ambulance is blaring with the siren, people sometimes are not very responding. So basically, what are the threats? You also come across situations where the authorities tend to request for the ambulances to carry dead bodies, because here in Africa, many people don't know the difference between hearses and ambulances. So it is your responsibility to educate. In some situations, they tend to use the ambulances as utility vehicles. So this is also one of the threats you may come across. Now, for us in Ghana Ambulance Service, we have some future plans. And the future plans include opening over 500 ambulance stations nationwide, train over 6,000 emergency medical technicians, reduce our response time to international level of 3 to 8 minutes, operate an air ambulance, boat ambulance, and mobile clinics, train community and volunteer corps as first responders, and we envisage to become a gateway to Africa as far as emergency services are concerned. Now, so basically these are some of the vehicles that we plan to have, and then we plan to run an air ambulance in future. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, healthcare in developing countries like Ghana has not traditionally focused on emergency medical care, and we hope that the efficacy of such care could be assessed by implementing pilot programs in several districts and regions, and based on the success stories, then you can scale up. And we are saying that establishing an EMS in a resource-constrained country is a challenge, but not an impossibility. All you need is just patience and perseverance, and with that you should definitely succeed. So in a nutshell, this is a brief presentation we want to share with colleagues out there and to share our experience with them. Thank you very much. Yeah, the question I just answered said, in dollar terms, what level of investment was needed to start the Ghana Ambulance Service? and what did that investment buy then? How long did that funding cover, and what's the average cost of operating an ambulance in Ghana today? So basically, I just mentioned that 50 ambulances was what we started with. 24 of them were used to open ambulance stations, and the other 26 went to various health institutions. But since then, the government realized that instead of buying ambulances and keeping hospitals, they would rather prefer to open ambulance stations. The reason being that when the ambulance goes to the hospital, it just serves only the hospital and does not serve the community. But if it's used to open an ambulance station, it serves both the hospitals and the communities. So the ambulances the 24 basically ambulances operated from 2004 till 2008. Then from 2009, they procured new ambulances, about 161. The contract started, they took over 1 year, so virtually we received them in 2010. So basically that is what happened in terms of investments. The next question is, what are the current and future needs of Ghana Ambulance Service? Realistically, the needs are more now because the awareness has been created and the demand is higher now. And so currently, we are actually having to open ambulance stations in every district capital. And every district capital will need a minimum of at least 5 ambulances. So the needs are really enormous. And in terms of the future, Ghana, as you are aware, has oil exploration now, and therefore the oil exploration in the western part of the country, and so the absence of an air ambulance is critical because should there be any disaster, to evacuate these patients or casualties to other parts of the country will be a problem. So air ambulance has become one of our priorities as part of our future plans. In terms of assistance that we need to resolve the vehicle downtime, normally every station is supposed to have a replacement vehicle, and so once the service time is due, the vehicle is supposed to go for maintenance, planned preventive maintenance. Unfortunately, because the station just have only one vehicle, it sometimes goes beyond the stipulated timeline of servicing, and therefore it tends to wear out more. And so the way out is to get more vehicles so that in every station you have at least 2 vehicles, so that when one goes out for servicing, the other will immediately replaces. I think it is one of the areas. The other area that we may need support, both technical in terms of helping to train more emergency medical technicians, and also funding. If we get funding, it will assist us a lot because we still have a lot of logistic constraints. So apart from that, any other help or assistance that anybody, whether in the private sector or public sector, that can help the Ghana ambulances, that we most welcome, because fortunately many of the African countries are trying to learn the success stories from the Ghana Ambulance Service. So any support we get will be more than welcome. Yes, whether you can get a document highlighting needs via email, absolutely. Normally what we would have preferred is to know the type of support you can provide so that we can tailor the request to that, instead of making requests that may not fall under your jurisdiction. So we are more than prepared to send a document, but we would have preferred, if it's possible, to know within your mandate and your scope of work what are the areas of support that you can offer, and we can readily provide the information to you. Yes, the question is whether there is room for a need for private sector EMS in Ghana. Sure, you realize that even in the most developed and advanced countries, you have private sector participation in the EMS system, because the public is not able to provide that adequately, because the needs or the demand is more than the supply. And therefore, if anybody is prepared to partner as whether as private or as public-private partnership, that is most welcome. Question is, our future plans include a significant increase of EMS stations and EMT trainings. What are the timelines associated with these projects? Are these funded projects, and how can we involve chamber business in the implementation of these strategic projects? Yeah, the answer to that is that these are future plans, and normally the implementation depends on availability of resources. So for example, if we were to get resources within a particular year, then we increase the number of intake for the training, and we also buy more ambulances. If we don't have enough resources, then we shift that to the next year when we get the resources. So basically, because the funding is inadequate, the rate of expansion is very slow. So where the Chamber of Commerce can come in is to assess our plans and see where from their perspective they want to support, and we are more than ready to accommodate that. One last question is that I touched on it a little, but is there a need for root cause analysis and process improvement consultancy? That's okay, like I did mention, this is what we normally plan to do, and our doors are open. Anyone with any ideas, anyone with any support that can help us to really improve the system, we are more than prepared to accommodate the individual. Mind you, fortunately, WHO in their success story book has captured the Ghana ambulance service, and therefore many countries within the African sub-region tend to come to Ghana to learn what we are doing. So we are more than excited to receive anybody who wants to support us. I really appreciate any support from the Chamber of Commerce, and it has been a pleasure interacting with you, and I hope to see some of you one day in Ghana or wherever we may find ourselves in future. So thank you very much for having me once again.